Welcome to the Fractal Effects live stream. Please make sure you read the disclosure. If you're following along with us, make sure you're doing a demo account, as this is for educational purposes only. This is not financial advice, and we are not financial advisors. Today we had some high-impact news drop. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different markets. Let's jump onto the charts. So we're looking at Euro GBP on the left, just to show you that we can actually do this strategy on any asset. And we're still looking at NAS on the right. Again, we're tracking it. We had a slight downside expansion model, manipulation to the top side. News drop here, 8:30 Eastern Standard. We're close to getting a confirmation on NAS. But again, today is a very chaotic day. We always want to stay away from certain news drops, FOMC, CPI, PPI. So today we'll be just watching this in hindsight, but we're going to focus on Euro GBP. Starting to get a confirmation. And in Euro GBP, we have a upside expansion model. During Asia session, we got a bullish confirmation. Didn't really get a deep retracement into the range, but we did get close to the 20 and a slight extension past the highs. London range, we got a downside expansion model, and then we ended up breaking the top, so we had a false day. So New York opening gap down here. We do have an EMA crossover. Let's see if this confirmation sticks in the next 2 minutes, 32 seconds, and then I want to see a draw back into the range. Today was also crude oil inventories. Otherwise we would have looked at oil as well. NAS sitting inside the weekly range right here, painted out by the aqua line. .51 seconds left. Let's see if this confirmation sticks. We do have a lot of breakaway gaps. Just to give us a rough idea of the range. Right now our 20 EMA just slightly above 50% on the Fibonacci, and also 50% of our range, of our dealing range. Okay, so confirmation stuck. So right now the biggest fair value gap that we have is right here. Let's see if our 20 gets above there, meets it, meets price somewhere in the middle. NAS also gave us a bearish confirmation. Looks like it's retracing. We have a big fair value gap here, 20 EMA sitting in it. Again, on days like this, our probabilities drop. It's not that you can't get a trade in. It's that if our probability is below 70%, then again, that's gambling. So we don't mess with CPI, PPI, FOMC, certain high impact news drivers, like we try to avoid those. We do have the 20 EMA now coming into this big fair value gap. We'll keep an eye on it just to see if it sticks to the rules. So another fair value gap down there. And we have the definition of all of these fair value gaps, volume imbalance, things like that in the Learning Hub. Be sure to check that out on the dashboard of Fractal Effects. Just waiting for a proper retracement. Right now it did retrace back to the top of the dealing range right there, marked out in the gray line. About 1 minute left. Getting our first rejection off the dealing range, but unless I see a few more candles here, I want to see this 20 cross into this fair value gap. I want to see it draw in a little deeper. Getting a second rejection in that same area, top of the dealing range. Nice, also bouncing off the bottom of the dealing range. Twenty EMA slowly making its way into the fair value gap of interest. The second it gets above this, we'll start focusing on this fair value gap. And again, we're watching Euro GBP. It's the Euro against the Great British Pound. Just to show you that this strategy does work in Forex, commodities, precious metals. We usually stick to the indices just because it's a better chance of us getting a trade every single day, or at least seeing a trade set up every single day. Watching NAS on the right. And we are looking at the CFD contract. So now the alert is actually working with our indicator. Just right click anywhere on the indicator, add alert. This is our invite only indicator, specifically on TradingView. So you just hit once per bar close. That'll ensure that you get the notification only after the candle closes over the range. So once per bar close, you can name it whatever you want. Spotlight confirmation. Make sure it's open-ended, the alert, instead of just setting it for a specific time period. This will make sure that you get alerts for all 3 sessions and continuously. Make sure you download the app onto your phone. That way you'll get the notification right on your phone. So for people who have like a busy schedule and don't want to necessarily sit through a ranging market, here we did get confirmation early, but there are days where it takes a while for the range to break. Yesterday, for example, I know there are a lot of people that were watching the news for obvious reasons, but yesterday I personally left on my notifications and got a great trade during Asia session. I got a notification. By the time I checked the charts, I'd already gotten a pullback. Although it was a quick move, got in here and exited right at the bottom of the range here. Just a quick trade in and out. I usually don't trade this session, but again, the notification hit me. Just decided to take a look. It was a quick setup. So we got two candles rejecting off the dealing range, top of the dealing range. Just trying to get a push. But again, I'd like to see a deeper retracement. If this thing leaves without us, that's fine. On a day like today where most markets are affected, we want to make sure that we have all points of confluence matching up. And right now, this fair value gap is still the fair value gap of interest for me, as we have the 20 EMA crossing into it right at the midpoint. I'd like to see it retrace a little deeper. Not to mention there's this fair value gap as well. This would be a shallow retracement if it turned around here and just continued up. And as mentioned before, those are looked at as runaway freight trains. It's hard to catch. Tomorrow is another high impact news day. So it'll be similar to today. Similar to today. So today was CPI, and then we also had crude oil inventories. Tomorrow we have PPI, and then later in the morning, which probably won't affect us at all, we have the 30-year bond auction. You want to make sure you're looking at the economic calendar. Got to know what day it is, and if there's any news dropping during the time that you're trading. You want to avoid that. I like to use forexfactory.com, but again, you can use any economic calendar that you prefer. As you can see, NAS, we had a bearish confirmation, one pullback to the dealing range, a tap, and then a push. Again, on a day like this, market is bound to do anything. I like to see if it actually does draw back in to our range, or if our 20 EMA comes down here and meets this fair value gap. I'm not interested in trading NAS today, just taking a look at it in hindsight, using it for educational purposes. Here in GBP, still gesticulating at the top of the dealing range. 20 EMA slowly moving up. Once we pass this fair value gap, I'll start looking at this one. Make sure you're always adjusting your fib levels so you know exactly where you're at. The lower this market drops, the lower the golden zone becomes as well. Slowly getting a proper push down on Euro GBP. 20 EMA slowly clearing this fair value gap. So we'll mark this one next. Remember, make sure you're in a demo account, make sure you're practicing, and then keep in mind, regardless of what asset you're trading, you have to be familiar with the lot size. Lot size is calculated differently. Make sure you use a lot size calculator. You can find one online. Just Google lot size calculator. There's many of them. You can put in your balance, risk tolerance, which is going to be obviously 1%. We always go for a 1 to 3 RR, risking 1 to make 3. So for Euro GBP, know your lot sizes. Slowly looking like we're getting a pullback here. All of our fair value gaps are down here. That's Asia, that's London, here's New York. Just want to go up a time frame here to see if there's any big. So there's our 15-minute fair value gap sitting right in the golden zone between 61% and 79% of the fib. Remember, the indicator paints out these key zones on all time frames. I like to always mark out the 15. So now when we drop back down to the 5-minute, we know exactly where it is. That's a little above the 5-minute New York fair value gap, but again, it extends our golden zone. Slowly clearing this fair value gap with the 20 EMA. Most likely we'll meet here. But could push down, we'll see. Remember, this has to look obvious in order for us to be interested. We want to see all of our points of confluence met. Closing in on 11 o'clock. Let's see if we can't get a confirmation, a retracement before that time. Getting a push here now. Excuse me. We will be dropping a video about mindset, about patience. That's where most traders end up failing. How to prevent FOMO. You want to make sure that you wake up with the right mindset and you get in front of your computer with the right mindset. And you have your set of rules written down, laminated right in front of you. So you stick to them. Yesterday, for example, ended up being a false day. But that happened after 12 noon, which is when we would have stopped anyways. There's a reason why we stop at noon. So you got to make sure you have all your rules set and you're following them to the T. Slowly getting a pullback now. 20 EMA clearing this fair value gap. Again, I'd like to see it maybe meet it right here. But we want to see a rejection. We want to see a candle wick. We want to see a bounce off of key levels. NAS still floating, no real pullback. Starting to reject down here. 20 EMA has already cleared this fair value gap. So there's one down here. That's most likely where it'll meet it. You have the weekly range, bottom of the dealing range, fair value gap, and if the 20 comes in there, into that zone, then that becomes a area of interest. But again, just in hindsight, just for educational purposes. We can mark this out. Thankfully, the indicator marks out even the tiniest little fair value gap for us. We just got to go in and drop a bigger one on top of it. We have so many students that miss all these, or we're missing all these little fair value gaps. That's one of the reasons we started highlighting even the little ones that aren't of major interest, but they're there just to let you know. You see all the red fair value gaps, you know that the market's going down. You see all the green ones, you can see that there might be a potential shift happening. You use it obviously in confluence with everything else, but it's just there to make it easier on the eye. So now that area becomes the area of interest for NAS. I'd like to see if the 20 comes down there. Euro GBP just swept these lows. I want to see it go deeper. Still not interested here. bouncing off the dealing range as well, top of the dealing range. Again, it could push from here, but I just want to see it come back down and tap this 20, touch this fair value gap. This much of a shallow retracement, I'm not interested in. We do see moves at times right off the dealing range. For example, right here, I don't think we're going to retrace too much past the dealing range, but that's only because our EMAs are slowly meeting us. We have other points of confluence. The dealing range alone, I personally am not satisfied with. I want to see it drop lower, hit one of our fair value gaps, touch our 20, and the probabilities go higher. Then we're looking at a 70% high probability trade, as opposed to we see rejection here, we jump in, probabilities are low. Just going to change the color of this fair value gap now that we've cleared it. I want to still know exactly where it is, but just don't want it impeding with anything. So just patiently waiting. A little after 11 Eastern Standard. Now slowly pushing back up. Let's drop our fib a little lower. As mentioned before, we're not really concentrating on NAS as today is CPI. Which for beginners is a definite no-no. But this is the area of interest. I want to see it hit this, tap the 20, bounce off the weekly range, that aqua line wick, and potentially push down. But as mentioned before, one of the reasons we don't trade CPI or PPI or FOMC is the probabilities are decreased for all strategies. And anything under 70% is gambling. So we're getting this movement now. So for anybody who went in long here, their stops are getting hit now. We've taken out all these lows. I want to see it get a little lower. Just patiently watching. Just floating in that area now, consolidating. I want to see a push down into this fair value gap at the very least. Maybe even a wick into this one, and then a rejection. Then I'll be interested in actually looking. We currently have an upside expansion model. Looks like we're getting this movement now. NAS also drawing back into the zone. On the left here we have Euro GBP for anybody joining us late. NAS on the right. Slowly getting closer to that fair value gap. NAS back at that fair value gap. Right at the bottom of the dealing range. We got the weekly range in aqua, and we got the 20. Euro GBP now slowly making its way into that fair value gap, closer to the 20. Hitting that fair value gap. NAS again, right at the fair value gap. We get the bottom of the dealing range. Let's see if we get some reaction here. Euro GBP right in that fair value gap now, but again, until it hits that 20, I'm not interested. Rarely does it come this close without touching it. Just patiently watching. NAS now slowly getting closer to the 20 EMA. We're well within the range now. Remember, even if the confluence is right, even if all the conditions look right, as mentioned before, we are high probability traders. And on days like today, high impact news drivers like CPI, PPI, FOMC, our probabilities drop. That's why we're not interested, regardless of all the confluence and the rejection. Over here, though, on Euro GBP, we are now at the fair value gap, close to the 20. Does it have to hit the 20? Can it take off without it? Of course, but our probabilities increase the second it taps it. That's what we're waiting for. We're at 11:09. If we're not in a trade by 11:30, we will conclude the session. Our goal is to jump in quickly and then hit our TP or get out before noon. Remember, this is a trading strategy for the every person. Anyone who has a busy schedule, has kids, only have an hour to trade. This is perfect. Can't trade in the morning, you can trade in the afternoon, trade in the evening. There's 3 different sessions: London, New York, Asia. Just depends on which one fits your lifestyle. Getting close now. We have not hit the consequence encroachment, which is the midpoint of that fair value gap. I want to see it tap this 20. I want to see a rejection. It might even go down and tap this fair value gap. It's about where this candle body closes, this one or the next one. That might intrigue our interest, because right now we have a shallow retracement. So we want to see all the points of confluence. This thing has to look obvious that it wants to push back up. Getting a little bit of rejection here, but we have not hit the midpoint. We have not touched the 20. So just patiently waiting. This thing could go lower, maybe even much lower. This is why we wait. Starting to get some reaction on NAS, right in the zone of interest. We got the 20 EMA, weekly range, bottom of the dealing range, fair value gap. Could even go up, tap this fair value gap, and push down. Where our focus is on the candle body. Starting to get a little bit of reaction here, but again, I'm not interested until we at least tap these two. Zoom in even more. NAS, now all the way past the 20. Let's see if it taps this fair value gap but still wicks and closes under this. Because of CPI, we're just watching NAS just to see if it matches the model. We're not looking for any trade setup. NAS right at the weekly range at the 20 EMA. Euro GBP. Still just hovering on a smaller time frame. This is just consolidating. We're close. I want to see it push in. I want to see it hit this 20. Nas still driving a little higher. Let's see if it pushes past this fair value gap. Euro GBP slowly making its way down now. Now we're slowly getting to an area of interest. Again, I want to see this 20 EMA hit. I want to see the midpoint of this fair value gap hit. And then I'd be interested to see if we get a wick. It wants to hit this fair value gap as well. Ideally, I'd like to see it wick through, hit this fair value gap, and close in this fair value gap. The candle body close here. So now we're actually looking for an actual entry to go long. Somewhere. "16 seconds. Five, four, three, here." Price returns to this zone. I'd be interested. I want to see it touch that and then create an engulfing candle. Remember, whatever asset you're looking at, make sure you're looking at it on multiple time frames. There's only so many screens that I can share, but we've been tapped in. That is 2R. So right at the midpoint of that fair value gap was our entry. Now as soon as we hit 2R, we move our stop losses to break even, we take some off the table, and we let it ride to 3. Let's move everything over a little bit. Could come back and tap it again. But we'd like to see this continue up and not push down from here and tap this. This is now at least a high probability entry. But we do want to see it start pushing. The longer it stays in this zone, the lower the probabilities become. We're back at the midpoint, the consequence encroachment of that fair value gap. That would have been another entry, technically, for anybody who missed it, I mean. Please make sure you're in a demo account if you're following along with us. Our goal is to help you become high probability traders, but you have to be able to see these setups on your own. You have to be able to make these decisions on your own. Again, that's 3R at the top. This is 2R. Sorry, the charts start to move a little slow once we go live. I'm trying to get there. You go. 3. Ideally, we would like to see some displacement now, some big moving candles, big fast moving candles. We don't want to sit in this area too long, otherwise it could pull back and go even deeper. NAS now stalled right there at the 20 EMA, at the weekly range. It did tap this fair value gap. Let's see if it wants to drive down from here, or if it just pushes up, going against model. It's patiently waiting now. We have 1 wick, 2 wicks. We want to see a push now. 0 GBP on the left. On the right, we're just watching NAS, not actually interested in jumping in on anything quite. NAS still stalled there, right by the 20 EMA, this fair value gap. This thing could push down, but again, the probabilities are low. Here at GBP, just pause there. As mentioned before, the longer we stay in this zone, the lower our probabilities become. And the longer it takes, we either close out our position or we make 2R our target. We don't want to see too many candles staying in this zone. Once it's delivered fair value, it should then take off. And when it doesn't, that means maybe it wants to drop lower and bring fair value to this area. Getting a push now. Let's see if this sticks. Nah, it's still frozen there. Still just waiting. We'd like to see a candle body close above this for Euro GBP to indicate that this thing actually wants to push up. As mentioned before, we do not want to see too many candles sitting in this area. Already we have 1, 2, 3. Let's see if this candle body closes above this, if we're still in this region. NAS stalled there now. Could get a power of 3 set up here, but again, lower probabilities. We're just watching this for educational purposes. This is the asset of interest right now, Euro GBP. We do want to see a push. 3 minutes 43 seconds left. It's having a hard time getting above this. So it's using this fair value gap right now and this fair value gap to engineer new liquidity. There are people going short here and people going long here. Again, we want to see a body close above this. 3 minutes left in this candle. NAS now entering that fair value gap. We're already at 11:32. If we don't get a push in the next couple of candles, we might just go for break even. This is not what we like to see. Once we see fair value brought to an area, there should be a quick movement out. Otherwise, it might, again, want to drop and bring fair value to this area. If this candle fails to close above this candle body, then we will go for break even. Right now we're in slight profit. "39 seconds. Again, if this candle body fails to close above these highs, our probabilities decrease. So we'll be exiting this position at break even. Slight profit actually, but now it could, again, it could just push up, but we're seeing more of a power of 3 setup happening here. Consolidation, manipulation, so even if it goes up, it could just push back down. This usually goes against any like model that we want to see. We'll still watch it play out, but, and again, this is us sticking to our rules. So even if it hits our TP, We don't feel bad about it. Right now we're getting reaction off of this fair value gap, which could push it down just to take out this bottom and then push up. In a power of 3 setup, what we see is consolidation, manipulation, and then distribution. So consolidation, the manipulation move, taking out any of these lows, and then distribution potentially to the top side. So we're back at the consequence encroachment, back to the 20 EMA. This thing could potentially push past this. Let's see what happens here. NAS still driving a little higher. We're at the midpoint of that fair value gap. We're still floating in that fair value gap off that 20 EMA, but again, the probability of this going further down and sweeping this low was higher once we see this much gesticulation happening. Still at that 20 EMA. Just want to see if this low is taken out. Once this low is taken out, we will conclude the session, because then it will most likely move into this fair value gap, and we're already past our entry time. But again, it's rules like that that save our position. Today you should have either broken even or got out in profit, but right there, just took out the lows. Would have hit our stop loss. So now we'll most likely tap into this fair value gap and then potentially drive higher. This could just have been consolidation, manipulation, distribution, so it could still end up going, taking out the tops. We are still bullish, but we're not interested in a second entry this late, 20 minutes till noon. We are still within this fair value gap. Again, looks like it's driving. Took out the lows. Could potentially move up from here or dip down and hit this fair value gap. Nah, still driving higher as well. So we'll conclude the session there. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to hit the notification, subscribe so you know when we're live. And we'll be on tomorrow, same time. Have a good rest of the day.